What does transhumanism actually mean?
To go beyond what is typical from the human diversity.
What are some of the most misunderstood assumptions about how the human brain could merge with technology?
We use 100% of our brain. There's no unused or idle brain there to do some more. We need to know exactly the trade-off.
If a small percentage of the population had it, they might try to block usage of it or dissemination of it.
And that will endow these people with capabilities nobody else has. Neurotechnology create a different type of population of people that may break the social coherence.
Pedro, thank you for joining us again. It's great to speak with you and look forward to the conversation. So, Pedro, just to get started, I guess from your perspective as a neuroscientist, what does transhumanism actually mean? And in practice, in reality?
Well, first of all, thank you for having, again, this conversation. I think that it means that to go beyond what is typical from the human diversity, meaning that adding capabilities, cognitive or physical, to human beings that extend more than we can do as a whole population, right? And this is not fixing problems that people have or to recover some disabilities that they lost. This is going beyond what is existing in what you find among the population right now.
Right. Okay. So physical and cognitive abilities and enhancements, not from a deficit, not from an illness, but actually from a normal place going upwards. And Pedro, why do you think it's become such a popular topic now?
Well, it's interesting to notice that we already are, in a way, all beyond our physical capabilities. When we use a car or use a tool, we're extended our physical abilities. And that has not caused any concern so far, mostly. But when we think about cognitive capability, then we become worried. And I think that the reason is because what we consider basically what is being human relates a lot what is going on in our brains, because our autonomy, our sense of agency, that we are in charge, that we are conscious beings, relied on the activity of the brain. So when we talk about neurotechnology that have the potential capability to overextend or change that, then we are more worried about transhumanism in other contexts.
So it's really the access to the brain, because the brain is more the core of what it means to be human sits in the brain.
Right. Well, you have to add the rest of the nervous system, but it's basically we can talk about the brain as the main organ involved in this.
And therefore, there's been some technology recently that actually claims to be able to access our brain, and that's why it's become such a topic.
Yes, increasingly we are able to understand more what is going on the brain. And now there have been a lot of development in creating brain-machine interfaces that so far has been all developed in the context of helping people that have lost typically motor capabilities. And this has been developed to restore part of this motor function, whether to move arms or of robotic arms, or to restore speech through a computer interface. So, but has not so far been investigated to add additional capabilities. That so far has not been developed.
And so, what are some of the assumptions, Pedro? Because obviously you're a neuroscientist, you know the physics of it. What are some of the most misunderstood assumptions about how the human brain could merge with technology?
Yeah, I think that the most common assumption is that we're around the corner or to develop technology that will be able to enhance our brain capability. But the truth is that we don't even have a general theory, a conceptual framework where we can understand exactly what the brain is doing. So we're not even close to be able to improve something that we don't understand. And this will take time. We have been so far able to understand a few things. And with this knowledge, we've been able to restore partially some of the capabilities. But in order to enhance things like memory or intelligence and so on, we would need to understand how intelligence and memory actually works in the brain, and that has not happened yet. So that doesn't mean that we don't have to be concerned about potential ethical consequences, but we are not on the verge of having this in the next year. So it will take some time, but what will need to happen first is that we have a full understanding of how the brain operates, and that's unfortunately is still, a long ways to go.
But Pedro, even without a full understanding, could companies start generating technologies, and without fully understanding, they could do trial and error, and like.
Yes, and that's exactly the reason we had to talk about this, because when we go and look and work and change things that we don't fully understand, the risk of having a mistake that affects people is very high, and that's where ethical concerns should be placed. It's not because people could consent to this, but by trial and error, we run the risk to deteriorate the cognitive capabilities of people and so on. So and that's why this has so far have been developed in the medical context, where there's a need for the patients, to improve their disabilities. But for normal people, to try to improve this, it's a high risk because we don't know exactly what we're doing. So there are companies that claim, right, that you can improve your memory by a brain-machine interface and so on. And but if you interfere with the brain without exactly knowing what you're doing, you may change things that we are considering that are very human, like our free will, right? We can and typically this happens even in medicine. We fix some things, but we typically sometimes they have side effects that we need to deal with. But you imagine what a lot of different side effects would happen if you just poke things in the brain, trying to modulate it to gain some function.
Well, let me ask you this, Pedro. Then, if there's a person who lost their memory and they have amnesia, and then there's a brain interface that helps them get their memory back, wouldn't that then prove to the company who's done that they can now try and enhance people on the memory side?
Yeah, that's an interesting possibility. There will be a motivation to develop neurotechnology to help these people to recover their memory deficits. And if by doing so we learn how to increase our memory, maybe some other machines can be developed. But there's something that people need to understand about the brain is that even when this is a marvelous machine, it still have a lot of limitation. We use 100% of our brain. There's no unused or idle brain there to do some more. So if we interfere with the brain, we will change what it's doing. So adding things, it will likely to modify things that the brain already does. And we need to know exactly the trade-off, what where we will lose and what we gain.
So what you said about the fact that we use 100% of our brains, I've always heard many times that people saying we only use 10% of our brain, or I don't know if you've heard that. I hear that a lot.
Yes, this is one of the big myths of neuroscience. Some say that it's Einstein was the one who started that, but This, I think, comes from the fact that you see that people have very different brain capabilities. There are people that use the brain that are very good at sports, for chess, for math, and so on. And maybe I just have this part of the brain that can do physics, but I just not using it. Well, this is not the way we know the brain works. When you look at using technology to look at brain activity, most of the day you're using all of it. So what happened is that we use a little bit different our brain. They're not exactly the same. The brains of you and me are different. But also through our history of interaction, we have learned to use this brain for different tasks. And so by training the brain to do one thing, we change the way the brain operates. And what is actually very good is that you have this huge diversity in the way that people use the brain. And this is what enrich us as human beings, right? Because there are people that contribute with very different things. But all of us use 100% of the brain. That's different what would happen in the medical context in which you may lose part of the brain or something happened that you can, and then you, of course, want to, fix it to put it back into the diversity, the typical diversity of human mind. But we actually are losing brain cells every day. So we're not getting better. Maybe technology, we can increase the number of brain cells. That's another possibility of incrementing our cognitive abilities. Have a bigger brain, but our brain requires a lot of energy, and it's very interesting. Our brain uses 10 times more energy than any other cells in our body. Having a brain this size is very expensive, so it's not there for free. And the idea that you will have brain there doing nothing does not make sense biology.
Got it. So if I think to understand what you're saying, so if we did anything to our brain, we will stop doing other things because we're 100% using it. However, if it became bigger, then potentially there is a way to add things to it without losing things if it became more brain cells.
Right. For example, or you can, if it will be possible, theoretically is possible, you can integrate your brain to an artificial brain and combine the capability of both. That will be, it's one of the ideas that people think about enhancement, right? That they will add something that is not replace, but add the capabilities that you already have with additional ones. And this is very ethically controversial, because then you will sort of improve the cognitive ability beyond what is normal in the diversity of the population. And that will endow these people with capabilities nobody else has. And the question is that how they will behave in relationship to the rest of the population. And that's a question that we need to ask ourselves. And looking at the way people behave, some of them may be very, well behaved, that it will contribute to the well-being, but maybe there will be somebody that will care about their own benefits and so on. So the ethical discussion of these things also need to account for the way we behave as human beings.
Yes. And it feels like if, as you said, if a small percentage of the population had it, they might try to block usage of it or dissemination of it.
Yes, one of the ethical principles in many technology is equal access to it. And this has happened with many technologies. Initially, of course, new technology are on the reach of people that have resources, right? And more richer population. But with time, this technology spread out to the rest of the population. Think about the cell phone, just as a typical example. But will the same happen if we have a neurotechnology that enhances brain capabilities? Will these people would like to share this? Or should we as a society ensure that this whole cycle of the development and usage of the neurotechnology require that this is accessible to everyone.
And then, of course, it's the question of some people might not want it, but if other people have it, they need to do it because otherwise they are at a
Right.
disadvantage.
Yeah, that's why it's very important that the community that develop neurotechnology, typically scientists or company, do so in a shared manner and in an open way. I understand that many parties are interested in financial benefits, but at the end, the ethical considerations require or at least recommend that this is shared in a way. Although, again, well, I hope that will not happen that way.
Yeah, um, completely. And Pedro, obviously, you're based in Latin America. Do you think there's different risks for countries that are in the developing world versus the US, for example, related to this dissemination?
From a basic science perspective, I think it's the same. The brains of somebody that was born in Latin America is identical to one that was born in Switzerland or US, right? It's the history of interaction and the opportunities they have in terms of learning and acquiring new skills is the difference so far, right? So, in that sense, is the educational experience that eventually will make more difference in different populations. Uh, the only thing, there's only one risk of technology. It is not only neurotechnology, but most technology are developed within a particular culture, typically in the upper north, Europe and US. And this technology may have contained uh, things, cultural uh, components that will be feel strange or threatened to local cultures. This concept, it's not really very obvious, but for example, music. You go to Latin American countries and people will sing in English, even they don't understand anything about the lyrics, and that modify the way that people enjoy music and so on, and they may even threaten the local music culture and so on. So technology is not completely neutral in this, and uh, this will be the typical or the only risk I see so far. Um, I see more advantages of the spread of technology and also neurotechnology among different countries. But again, the access again will be a problem, right? If if you require some level of economic development to access this because you need some infrastructure and so on, then it would not be even among different countries.
Yeah, clear. And obviously, if there was an uneven distribution of access, do you think there's risks to social cohesion, democracy?
Yeah, I think that this is very important because we as a species, I'm a biologist, so I look all these things through the eyes of evolution, right? We have been very successful as a species because we actually collaborate. We move ourselves between two big forces, altruism to help and develop a community together, and of course my own benefits, right? But so far as a species, we have had success by collaborating. So if neurotechnology create a different type of population of people that may break the social coherence, and because they will be more different than they actually are, and when and we know through the history of the human race that differences create suspicious and then conflict and so on. So I think that you have a good point there, that it's not only about the brain, it's about how people relate to each other and how they work together or not and share the benefits of the technology.
Great. Pedro, thank you very much for your time, for your insights.
Thank you.